Welcome to News for Scotland on the Scotland Channel. I'm Hector Campbell. We are the only news show in Scotland which truly reflects what's really happening in Scotland without the gaslighting of anti-Scottish Anglo-British mainstream media. Support us by liking and sharing this show and subscribing to the Scotland Channel. And because we don't have establishment billionaire backers with vested interests supporting us like GB News has, please consider making a donation to the channel by visiting our website, thescotlandchannel.tv/donate. Here are this week's Scottish news headlines. In what was hailed as one of the largest Scottish independence marches for some time, around 3,000 people waving saltires and Yes flags took part in Saturday's All Under One Banner event in Edinburgh. The far bigger Yes event overshadowed three other protests taking place in the city on the same day, including an anti-immigration protest, which attracted just over 70 people, and a counter-demonstration of around 300 people from the group Stand Up to Racism. And whilst, as always, the much larger independence event went without incident, the anti-immigration rally organised by the fringe unionist group A Force for Good and counter-demonstrators traded insults with each other. All Under One Banner said their Edinburgh rally was a demonstration against the perverted and inverted use of the Scottish saltire by anti-refugee groups, such as protesters at the Force for Good rally, as well as calling for the Scottish people to have the right to decide their own future. News for Scotland's Hugh Stewart interviewed some of those taking part in the day's events and asked them about their thoughts on the fast-approaching 2026 Scottish elections.
I live in Edinburgh, and I heard that there was a party down here about Scottish independence, so I thought, well, I'm Mo from Source, I do digital activism, I better come down here and have a party with everybody.
So John Swinney said during the week that a vote for SNP will be a vote for independence. Are you happy with John Swinney's tactics?
Well, I'm a member of the SNP, that's the first thing, but I have to say I'm not a zealot. I believe wholeheartedly, yes, that what he's saying is the right things that people need to hear. But what about the activists? Maybe the activists have felt a little bit let down by a lot of the things. It's a very similar sort of thing to say. However, it's not just the activists that we need to speak to. It's the wider population of Scotland to hear that the good things that would come with independence, the positive things that would come with independence. And that's what John Swinney's trying to do. That's what their digital media is trying to do. And that's what his amendment's trying to do as well. Trying to basically get the party behind one particular thing. Whether or not we vote for that when we go to conference, I don't know, okay? But only time will tell, and only the public will tell. And I think we should just get behind the idea of independence and what could be better for Scotland, because at the end of the day, it can't be any worse than what we've got just now.
Well, just finally on the question of tactics, Kenny McCaskill a few minutes ago here in Edinburgh said it should be SNP 1 and vote for another party such as ABBA obviously, or a second vote. What do you think of the question of SNP 1 and 2?
I have always voted SNP 1 any other independence party, and I will be voting SNP 1 any other independence party. The reason being for that is the list vote is a great way, of basically putting more bums on the seats in the Parliament that are pro-independence, but it's also a clear demonstration of the percentage of people that would want independence for Scotland. You could take SNP votes, ALPA votes, Green votes, you could take ISP votes, independence for independence votes, okay, and put them all in one bag. And if they're over 50%, it doesn't give us independence, but what it does do is become a severe thorn in the side for Westminster. How can they turn around and say Scotland doesn't want independence if 50% of the voting population vote for that on the list? And that's what I think we should be doing.
My name's Amity, I'm here for the Independence March.
Now, I guess, and you didn't have a vote in the 2014...
Oh no, I didn't, and I was only 6 at the time, and I think we really do need another one, because, I mean, by 2030 there will be 1 million people just like me who never got a chance to decide their future. And how is it fair that our parents' generation got to do it for us?
Do you think John Swinney's put independence back on the agenda?
Absolutely, he has put it forefront in the agenda. I was actually at the speech and I was really, really impressed with the enthusiasm and commitment he had to independence at the front of the campaign. The only time we've ever got an independence referendum is also the only time we have ever had an SNP majority.
Today,
We came up here from Wales to support Scotland get their independence, and then hopefully Wales will follow suit.
The support for independence in Wales has been growing recently. Do you think the same as Scotland? Do people feel that things could be done better if people had control of their own affairs instead of leaving it to Westminster?
Well, Scotland will be 100% better off without Westminster involvement, and they need the independence. We're a colonised country, the same as Wales, same as Ireland, same as Cornwall, same as Palestine. We all need to be independent and free, especially from the English government, because they're bringing the whole world down. And that Union Jack is a big target on our back. Sorry?
Now, both Scotland and Wales have an election next May.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to shape up in Wales? Are people completely fed up with Labour and the Conservatives now, in your view?
Well, Wales is coming on. We've got the majority of the youngsters, 56% are now for Yes Cymru, which is what we need. It's the youngsters, not the elder. You know, our generation's gone. We're fighting for their independence now and their quality of life, not ours. We're past it now.
Unfortunately, there's no party to represent all that. Plaid Cymru are very enamoured with SNP and they're doing silly things as a result. So, reform are a bit of a danger in Wales.
Yeah, they are. Reform are a danger. A big danger in Britain, never mind in Wales. But, you know, we'll just have to keep fighting, won't we? We fought them on the beaches, we'll fight them on the streets. Simple.
Thank you for talking to the Scotland Channel. Have a safe journey
Thank you for
back.
having us.
Watch to the end to see a photographic review of the day with images by photographer John Love. The SNP are out in front by a significant margin for next year's Scottish elections, according to the latest poll of Scottish voting intentions. The More in Common survey of 1,104 Scots voters put the SNP on 37% of the Holyrood constituency vote, compared to Labour on 17% and Reform on 16%. The Tories and Lib Dems were tied on 12%, while the Greens polled at just 5%. On the Holyrood regional list vote, the SNP were again out in front on 32%. Reform and Labour both polled at 16%, while the Lib Dems took 14% and the Tories 12%. The Greens registered 8% on the list. The SNP are also ahead in voting intentions for the next UK general election, although this will never translate into a win for Scotland, as Reform UK's Nigel Farage is almost certain to become the next English Prime Minister, regardless of how Scotland votes. Farage's Holyrood seat gains reflect the collapsed Tory vote in Scotland. SNP MP Pete Wishart said it was simply a stunning opinion poll. The SNP is miles ahead, and it's neck and neck between Labour and Reform, he said. The poll also found that just 13% of Scottish voters think Labour taking power in Westminster has been good for Scotland. A total of 56% said that the new Labour government had been bad for the people of Scotland, with 31% saying they did not know. Among those who voted Labour last year, more believe that Keir Starmer's government has been bad for the people of Scotland. The poll also recorded net favourability ratings for party leaders, with First Minister John Swinney scoring -12. Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar was on -18, and Scots Tory leader Russell Findlay on -11, while Nigel Farage was on -14. Independence vlogger Gordon Ross of IndyCar said that Farage becoming Prime Minister would be a catastrophe for Scotland. His plans for removing Britain from the European Human Rights Convention and replacing it with a Farage Bill of Rights would remove the right of Scots to protest against the Union or anything Farage doesn't like. Ross also said that whilst there are those unhappy with the SNP, especially in relation to independence, it was vital that people voted SNP in the constituency vote and for another independence party in the list vote to prevent unionists getting in through the back door. That would allow more independents supporting parties like the Greens, ALBA or ISP to keep unionists out and put friendly pressure on the SNP to pursue independence as a matter of urgency. The new Scottish Secretary, Douglas Alexander, has failed to confirm whether Scotland is in a voluntary union in his first TV interview since taking on the role. Alexander took over from Ian Murray, who was unceremoniously sacked in a sudden government reshuffle last week. The East Lothian MP repeatedly refused to confirm how Scotland could leave the Union, saying that Scots had decided to stay in the 2014 referendum. Alexander, who previously served as Scottish Secretary from 2006 to 2007, claimed that voters really don't see independence as a priority, despite a rise in support for it. Alexander also claimed the 2014 election was a free and fair one, failing to mention that the Anglo-centric mainstream media pushed the unionist cause relentlessly, and the Better Together campaign lied on a range of issues including pensions, all of which went unchallenged by the British media. He also failed to mention how the No campaign broke election rules by publishing the vow in the Daily Record on the eve of the poll, and he failed to address concerns that postal ballots were sent to England to be counted. Alexander added, "The Scottish people can make their choice ultimately in the Holyrood elections in 2026. SNP MSP Kenneth Gibson said, "Scotland has a right to decide our own future. It really is time for unionist politicians to stop denying democracy and outline under which circumstances a referendum could take place." But what Douglas was right about is that the people of Scotland will have the chance to have their say in 2026. And as recent opinion polls show, it won't be a good showing for Labour if they continue to deny Scottish democracy. Ian Murray, meanwhile, was appointed as Minister in 2 UK departments, as Culture Minister and Minister of Science, Innovation and Technology. His removal from the Scotland office was said to have prompted anger from Scottish Labour, with many putting the party's success in Scotland down to Murray, who had served as Scottish Labour's only MP after the 2015 election saw Labour lose 40 out of its 41 seats to the SNP. Independence commentator Leah Gunn Barrett said that Douglas Alexander is even more dangerous than his predecessor. Alexander was forced to pay back £12,600 of taxpayers' money for claiming expenses for his second home, while he was also receiving rental income on the same property between 2001 and 2005. In 2004-2005, he claimed £350 on advertising himself on pitch side hoardings and in match programmes at Johnston FC, adverts that should have been paid from Labour Party funds. Other expenses he passed off to the taxpayer included a CD player, new garage doors and a chimney sweep, she said. Alexander also pimps for the UK nuclear industry as it tries to worm its way back into Scotland. He supports English Labour's vow to reverse the SNP ban on new nuclear, even though Scotland is self-sufficient in clean renewable energy. On June 26th, he penned a propaganda piece in the Herald, where he said that Scotland needed a fleet of small modular reactors, SMRs, even though they aren't commercially viable anywhere in the world and generate even more toxic nuclear waste than larger plants, said Gunn Barrett. John Swinney met with Donald Trump earlier this week to urge the US president to remove tariffs from Scotch whisky. The meeting in the Oval Office lasted 30 minutes and was described by the First Minister as constructive. The Scottish Whisky Association has argued for an exemption or a relaxation of the rules for the industry, arguing that Scotch whisky holds a unique position as it can only legally be produced in Scotland. Scotch whisky and Kentucky bourbon have made common cause, said Swinny. This isn't a case of US business versus imports to the US. Both agree that they want no tariffs. That's a real strength. Swinny previously raised the issue of whisky tariffs with Trump when they met in Aberdeenshire recently. Trump is set to make a second visit to the UK from September 17th to 19th as part of a state visit. Underinvestment by the UK government could scupper Scotland's hopes of being the home of satellite launches in Europe. As reported previously by News4Scotland, SaxaVord is close to becoming Europe's first and only commercial vertical launch spaceport in Europe. But despite its importance, the UK Space Agency spends 85% of its budget in England. Independent Norway is developing its own spaceport, which also hopes to capitalise on commercial satellite launches from Europe, with its first launch planned for March next year. Unlike Scotland, which had a bigger North Sea oil sector than Norway, Norway has a sovereign wealth fund of nearly £2 trillion, whilst England sold off Scotland's oil at 3 times less than Norway, leaving Scotland with nothing. Norway, as an independent country, is able to invest its wealth in its own space sector. Scotland is reliant on England to invest, but so far it hasn't, largely because SaxaVord is in the Shetland Islands, not the south of England. A Westminster report acknowledged that the UK is falling behind its European counterparts because of underinvestment leaving Scottish spaceports at a competitive disadvantage. Space expert Professor Malcolm MacDonald of Strathclyde University said that without backing from the UK government, especially in infrastructure, Scotland risks missing a generational opportunity to lead in the space launch sector. Around 100 protesters defied Labour's prescription of Palestine Action as a terror group in a silent protest outside the UK government offices in Edinburgh on Saturday. Protesters silently wrote, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action," on placards which they held in front of the UK government offices, while surrounded by another 300 activists taking part in solidarity. Some 1,000 people who had joined a Stop the War march from the bottom of Edinburgh's Mound arrived at Queen Elizabeth House with chants ceasing before they merged with the silent protest. In London, a similar protest, both in size and message, erupted into frantic scenes after police arrested 890 people holding placards. One man was seen with blood streaming down his face as officers arrested him. Other officers were also seen drawing their batons against protesters. Met Police officers forced their way through crowds carrying arrested protesters and had screaming arguments with demonstrators in Parliament Square. However, to their credit, Police Scotland took a different approach to the demonstration after Chief Constable Joe Farrell was warned by the Scottish Human Rights Commission that the force could be in breach of human rights and free speech. No arrests were made and no confrontations happened during the 60 minutes the protest took place. Willie Black, a founding member of Edinburgh Gaza Genocide Emergency Committee, said the demonstration was about opposing the prescription of Palestine Action. "We want to offer the police a different approach in Scotland," Black said. "We want the police in Scotland not to arrest, and we want to encourage them to see that we're perfectly peaceful, that there is no aggression, that the people who are protesting today, with their placards and their t-shirts, are in fact doing it for the best reasons. They want to stop genocide. If we're arresting people for a t-shirt and for a placard, then what is the cost of blowing a child to bits? Apparently very little." The UK government has ruled that Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza, contradicting a mounting body of international experts who say it is. In a letter dated September 1st, former UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy concluded that despite the widespread slaughter in Gaza, Israel was not acting with genocidal intent. This is despite Israeli leaders admitting on Israeli TV their intent to kill every Palestinian man, woman, and child, and, before the IDF banned them, Israeli soldiers filming their war crimes and posting them to social media. The Scottish Greens said the letter amounts to genocide denial and is a grotesque new low for the UK government, which continues to supply weapons and military support to Israel. Former Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvey said the UK government are totally ignoring Palestinian rights and lives in order to keep arming and supporting an Israeli government that is committing some of the worst war crimes and atrocities of this century. Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who unlike Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is not subject to an international arrest warrant, was in London this week for talks with Keir Starmer. Harvey added, "Labour is legitimising Israel's war crimes while locking people up for holding cardboard signs. It is the exact opposite of what should be happening." SNP rebels have accused John Swinney of a half-hearted approach to independence and published their own plan to secure Scotland's freedom. They want their motion to be discussed at the SNP conference in Aberdeen in October. In it, they argue that, unlike Swinney's motion, which calls for an SNP majority in Holyrood, the majority of list votes for pro-independence parties would secure a mandate. They are critical of Swinney's document, Your Right to Decide, which they say is peppered with references to a voluntary union and sovereignty. Yet the words sound hollow when the SNP leadership fails to deliver the power contained therein, they said. In their document, the rebels acknowledge that a unilateral declaration of independence won't work, arguing that if the Holyrood list results show a popular majority in favour of dissolving the union, then that is a sufficient mandate. A plebiscite election is a right to choose. Unlike the SNP leadership resolution, which is asking Westminster to let it happen, this step makes it happen. The activists said that trust, camaraderie, and a sense of purpose must be restored to the independence movement, and that while individual parties can contest seats, they must all agree that every vote cast for these parties on the list vote is a mandate to deliver independence. The document also says the SNP is a diminished organisation after 2014, citing halved membership and a hollowed-out membership base. To fix this, they say, the independence movement needs to be mobilised. Because the Scottish Parliament cannot legislate on independence as an executive branch of Westminster, the rebels propose the setting up of a new institution in the form of the Provisional Government of Scotland to provide political legitimacy and lay the legislative groundwork, and would bring in experts from across the movement on currency, taxation, defence and other areas. If the English state fails to negotiate between election day on May 7th next year and May 1st, 2027, the Provisional Government will become the Government of Scotland and declare the Union dissolved, while the Scottish Parliament will be taken over by the Parliament of Scotland, comprising all members of the former devolved Parliament. The rebels describe Swinney's resolution as leisurely and indeterminate, with no respite to our suffering population. Its lack of a date and mechanism to deliver independence is half-hearted and deferential, they say. The proponents of it know that it doesn't deliver independence without the consent of the UK government, and it proposes no sanction on the UK government if it doesn't consent. Part of the world-famous West Highland Railway is set to close to allow almost £15 million worth of upgrades to be carried out. Often ranked among the world's most scenic railway journeys, the line also plays a key role in supporting tourism and local economies across the north of Scotland. With 33 stations, it connects visitors to destinations like Fort William, Mallaig, and the iconic Glenfinnan Viaduct, while also serving as a lifeline for rural Highland communities. Network Rail has announced that part of the line will close for 9 days so that engineers can carry out essential repairs and upgrades across key locations. The line will be closed from the evening of November 7th until the morning of November 17th as work including track renewals, improving drainage, and refurbishing critical structures is carried out. Network Rail unveiled its plans to replace around 10 kilometres of rail and over 9,000 sleepers, along with other refurbishment work. There will be a rail replacement bus service for the stations which are affected with the closure.